Chapter 5. Mid-morning comes and goes as Rod and Eric continue east toward Mercantile. The majority of the morning has been spent in silence, Eric doing his best to keep the nightmares from last night at bay. He just stares out of the passenger window, silently counting the dead shrubbery. 72, 73, is that 74 or 2 bushes? Eric mutters. Rod looks over to him. He's not one for trivialities and feels small talk is nothing more than wasted breath. He can tell, however, that Eric wants to talk, but doesn't want to come off like a child asking 20 questions. Rod decides to break the silence. He points to the glove compartment. Any more cigarettes? Eric flinches from Rod's voice. He gives a slight glance to Rod before opening the glove compartment. Yeah, at least there's that, Eric answers with a bit of animosity. He's still sour about the rations Rod ate while he was asleep. It quickly passes as the thought of the sirens comes rushing back. If it wasn't for the hunter, there's no telling where Eric would be. Probably a carcass for the buzzards once those demons were finished with me, Eric thinks as he grabs 2 cigarettes. He hands one to Rod, then holds the lighter out for the hunter to light the cigarette's tip. Thanks, Rod says. Eric replies with an indifferent, sure, and looks back out the passenger window. Rod takes several drags, trying to find some common ground for discussion. At least something they can discuss that would be interesting to both of them. Eric, on the other hand, goes back to counting the wilted bushes that pass by. His glum demeanor changes sharply as he loses the count of shrubbery. Though the whole matter was trivial, to say the least, it kept his mind off the horrors of the previous night. That's it, Eric whispers. The silence has gone on for too long, so he decides to talk about what he knows best, life in the dark city. I wonder who fought last night, Eric says aloud, in hopes to pique Rod's interest. The hunter catches the bait and questions with an inquisitive hum. In the Colosseum. Last time I was there, the summer season was drawing to an end. Kraken, man from Lynn, and Ragnar were the only remaining fighters. My money is on Kraken. Ragnar's been fighting for shit. Eric stops to recall the first time he saw the champion fight in the Colosseum. It's gotta be like 20 years or something like that. He's flippin' old at this point. Really surprised he's lasted so long. So, how long have you lived in the walled city? Rod asks. The hunter has never stepped foot in Orgrimdir, so he's intrigued by any insight into the city. Shit, all my life. I never knew anything else. Like most people, I drew the short end of the stick. Eric reflects aloud, looking out the window. How so? I was born in the slums. The city is sectioned into 4 different quadrants. Quadrant 1 is where the upper crust live. You know, the ruling class, basically. If you're lucky enough, you can at least get a job there and afford to live in Quadrant 3, which is the living district. Quadrant 2 is the industrial district, and good old 4 rounds out the slums. Home sweet home. What did your parents do for a living? Rod asks, flicking the cigarette out the window. My dad worked for the tax collector. I guess he earned a good wage. Not enough to move out of the slums, though. He died when I was pretty young. Don't remember much about him. I don't remember him beating me, so I guess he was a good guy. I'm sorry to hear, Rod says, lighting another cigarette. You mind me asking what happened? Not at all. Most I can give you is what I was told. My mother tends to think there was more to it. Eric stops. The memory of that day comes back. A moment so long ago. He was no more than 5 when he saw his father ripped apart in the Colosseum. He was charged of treason. apparently skimming off the top from taxes. The charge was conspiring against the crown, and treason is dealt with the highest penalty. Death, Rod interjects. Yeah, Eric answers with a slight sigh. He was carried to the center of the arena. His arms and legs were attached to ropes and to this contraption, this god-awful machine. Eric's memory paints the mechanism in his mind perfectly. The rope was secured to an engine. He can still see the worn-out belts whirling around massive gears, the steady stream of smoke rising out of the top. It made a terrible roar when it started tugging the rope. Eric's spine tingles recalling that sound, the excess of smoke and the screams of his father muted by the cheering crowd. It ripped his arms and legs clean off. The finale was his beheading. Rod is speechless at the brutality. He had no idea of the atrocities that went on in the walled city. Midland, for its part, is no better. But he had wanted to at least hold out hope that there was still some type of civility. Looks like he was wrong. Eric sits silent for a while, letting his mind tread off into dark places. Rod gives the young man time to reflect on his past. He remains silent for a bit longer. The sun crawls to mid-afternoon as the van nears the mountain range. No sense dwelling on the past, Eric. The guilt will eat you alive. Trust me, I know. Eric shrugs at the hunter's remark. I guess. You're probably right. Truth be told, this has definitely been an amazing trip. You know, apart from the crazed demons and the torturous asylum. There's still some good in this world, that I promise you, Rod replies while veering the van toward a cluster of trees in the distance. So, I gotta ask, why Darkroot? About a year or so ago, Eric answers, I got indebted to a local mob in the slums known as the Three Fingers Gang. I was brought in to be a thief, which I turned out to be pretty good at. Not long ago, they wanted me to sneak into a warehouse to steal several crates of Darkroot. They never went into specifics. It was a job. I had no choice but to go through with it. You don't say no to the Three Fingers Gang. When I was caught, the soldiers knew exactly where I'd be. Think you were set up? Oh, no doubt. During lockup, I remember seeing several guards talking to a group of soldiers. These soldiers weren't like anything I've seen before. They were cloaked in dark leather robes with metallic arm guards. The guards were extremely respectful to these soldiers. I'm sure it was more out of fear than anything. There was this other man there, or at least I think it was a man. He was completely hidden in a black robe. No features were visible. No one seemed to acknowledge him, but I saw him, and he saw me. Eric turns to Rod with a smug shrug. Next thing I know, the elite soldiers nab me from lockup and send my ass down here. And you said before that it had something to do with your hair or eyes? Rod inquires further. Yeah, whatever that means. I mean, the easiest thing would be to cut off my hand and send me on my way. The typical punishment for a thief. Rod does his best to explain to Eric the details of the sanitarium and its purpose. Dr. Armistead dealt with the manipulation of energy between this world and the astral. His theory was that by causing enough physical trauma to the body, that the pain would exude energy, thus creating this schism between planes. Maybe there's a connection with certain types of people. Beats me, man. Eric exhales, stretching out the best he can in the seat. So, what about your mother? Is she still alive? Rod questions, changing the subject. Sure, I guess. She's one tough cookie. Kinda had a falling out several years back. She went her way and I went mine. But I figure she's still doing dirty work for the Three Fingers Gang. They control the slums and the majority of District 2. They got their fingers in everything. What about you? Got any family? Eric asks. Rod is hesitant before answering. Yes. And that is all. He doesn't elaborate, and Eric doesn't push either. He can easily see it was a sensitive subject. Eric looks out of the window again. The rhythmic sound of the van's wheels cause Eric's eyelids to grow heavy. His body desperately needs sleep, but the events with the sirens are still too fresh. He decides to hum a little melody his father used to sing to him right before bed. The vile visage of the sirens didn't fill his dreams. It was of his father. His father's deep voice, slowly carrying him off to peaceful dreams. Time rolls on as the van putts along closer to the forest near the base of the mountain. The land is still barren in this area, except for the bushes and vines that scatter to and fro. The sky is a deep blue without a cloud in sight. The sun beats down on the roof of the van. Both windows are lowered for the dry air to evaporate the steady flow of sweat. Rod partakes in several cigarettes while his partner sleeps. Eric springs forward from his seat. He's escaped the dreaming world. Breathing heavily, he looks over to Rod. Bad dream? Rod asks, blowing out a large smoke ring. No, worse. Eric pants. He fights the crust from his eyes to catch his bearings. I was back in the sanitarium with those two asshole orderlies, Jim and whoever the hell the other was. They were dead and chatting some nonsense. Then the hell out of nowhere, this spider with syringes for legs started attacking me. Pretty dark, Rod replies. What do you think it means? I doubt it's a premonition. You've been through a lot, probably just your mind trying to cope, Rod answers. Eric no longer feels the sporadic bumps of the earth. Looking around, he questions, why did we stop? Rod motions out ahead, near the opening of the tree line. Eric squints out to the lifeless forest. He detects nothing at first, but then, to his surprise, he sees dark shadows moving from the left of the tree line. The shadows stop unexpectedly for a moment, then continue along the forest. Rod disturbs Eric's silent gaze. My bet, it's a pack of mutants. Let's hang out here for a second and let them pass. I noticed them on my way to the sanitarium. It's not like them to stay in one place for so long. Or it could be another pack, answers the Dark One. What exactly are they? Rod stops for a moment and reaches for another cigarette. He lights it, then takes a long inhale, looking for the correct words to describe the dark blots trekking ahead of the van. As he exhales, Rod looks at Eric and does his best to describe the creatures. Well, the story goes that it was a result of the ancients. They fought each other for resources with advanced weaponry. One of these weapons caused a nuclear fallout, which resulted in the ancients being contaminated. Most of these people died horrific deaths, but those who lived passed the genetic mutation down to their descendants, each generation becoming more mutated. Most people were afraid that the mutations were contagious and either killed the mutants or exiled them to the Wasteland. Eric leans back in his seat, trying to process this new knowledge. Holy shit. I never knew. Most people don't. Many of the outlying colonies today are illiterate, and the knowledge is either lost or passed down through word of mouth, which, in a weird irony, causes the history of mutants' origins to mutate over time. The lands to the far west are known as the Radiated Lands. Their origin starts there. Most of the area is uninhabitable. Have you been to the Radiated Lands? Only the outskirts, Rod answers, still keeping a stern eye at the meandering shadows in the distance. How come? Nature found a way to survive. Sprawling green trees and vast vegetation go on for miles. But if you spend too much time there, you start to change yourself. Most people become ill and die. It's a poisoned paradise. Damn. Do you think anything lives there? Animals? Maybe humans can become accustomed to it. Evolve over time, as you said. Possibly. I heard rumors that the mutants have created a massive civilization deep within, but I found no evidence. I'm not saying it's not possible, just no evidence to back up the rumor. So much about this world I never knew, Eric ponders aloud. He lets out a half-hearted laugh. My mother was definitely right. How so? I have lived quite the naive life. I'm sure most people in the walled city have. Now that you have this knowledge, what do you plan on doing with it? Quite the question indeed, Eric thinks. As much as he hated his life in the walled city, would he go back? It's still his home and the only place he's ever known. He doesn't answer the hunter, not yet, and the thief doesn't think Rod was expecting him to answer. It was more of a statement than a question. A way to plant that seed, to say that it's never too late to find yourself, that there's always a chance to redefine who you are and what you wish to become. Looks like they're far enough. Rod starts the engine and heads toward a narrow passage about 300 yards east of their current location. The passage is nestled behind several large bushes and trees. He maneuvers the van through the natural barricade so as to not give clues of the hidden channel. About 50 yards in, the natural dirt road inclines. He accelerates as much as the van will allow. Maybe it will help if we rock, Eric mocks with a grin, enjoying the sarcastic comment more than he should. Rod pays no mind and keeps his attention on the current obstacle. By the grace of all that is still holy in the world, the decrepit van inches its way to the peak of the hill, at which point the metal beast begins its rapid descent down. Eric grips the handle by the window tightly as they speed downhill. Rod fights with the steering wheel as the wasted shocks snap against every pebble and rock they run over. The van runs over a hole which ejects both men from their seats. Eric has the misfortune of knocking his head against the ceiling. As the tattered vehicle meets the more even ground, Eric spots a flicker of light dance across Rod's face. Before he can open his mouth, Rod lifts his hand and makes 3 unique gestures. In quick succession, Rod slides 3 fingers over his forehead. Extended over the dash, he signs 1 finger, 3 fingers, then 2 fingers. He ends the gesture with his hand making a hole. Bewilderment paints across Eric's face as he looks out ahead and sees a section of the mountain move. A large black hole peers out before them as the van continues its path forward. Well, hell, a password, Eric mutters to himself. The vehicle passes through the opening, merging itself with the black void ahead. It's complete darkness for several seconds until Rod flips the switch to the headlights. The beams splat onto the walls of the tunnel, displaying its smooth finish to the men. Eric notes several hooded figures walking along either side of the tunnel. They look to be patrolling, carrying rifles. Up ahead of them is a tiny pinprick of light, which grows in size and intensity as they move forward. The men reach the blinding hole, which has tripled in size. The van sputters and stops as the last bit of gasoline is consumed. The bumper just barely breaks the plane of light meeting the tunnel exit. Rod exits the van, extending his arms out as far as possible to stretch his stiff muscles. Finally made it. Let's go, kid. Go where? Is this Mercantile? Eric asks Rod as he follows suit. Rod's stretch looks so soothing. Eric's body can't resist, and the young thief outstretches his arms. He throws in a yawn for good measure. Both men exit the tunnel and are greeted by the sun's blinding light. It takes several seconds for their eyes to adjust. Eric desperately rubs to speed up the process. When his eyes adjust, he is met by a sight he's never seen before. "Holy shit," he exclaims. "It's so green." The tunnel exit sits on a grass-covered hill. Eric's eyes follow the dirt trail all the way down to a valley. The mixture of different greens, from grass to weeds, bushes, and trees, flood his senses. A cool breeze moves in from his left and glides over the tall grass, swaying like an ocean tide. Rod begins the walk down into the grassy vale as Eric's eyes meet the quaint village resting near the deep blue sea. As the two men walk to the village, Eric stops at every new plant he discovers and asks Rod for its name. At first, the hunter raised no qualms about explaining the plants to the ignorant thief. Living your entire life in a city surrounded by an enormous wall, there's bound to be questions when coming to this isolated paradise. Rod's demeanor has shifted to agitation from Eric's exhaustive inquiries the closer they get to Mercantile. He finally snaps, "It's a dandelion." Eric catches Rod's tone. The onslaught ceases for the remainder of the hike. As the men reach the entrance, Eric looks up at the worn sign, which seems to be a hodgepodge of various signs, as if each letter was cut from another sign and fastened together to create something new. He reads it aloud. "Mercantile. We finally made it." "Yep, and with some sunlight to spare," Rod says, passing through the gate. He waves for Eric to follow. The men proceed through the gate, then pass over a small wooden bridge. Eric looks down, watching the fish leisurely swimming. He's quite taken aback at how clear the water is. His mouth begins to drool at the sight. Rod feels Eric slowing down. "Hey, keep up," he barks. "Sorry," Eric replies, rushing back to Rod's side. They continue further into the square. Eric can't help but admire the odd-looking architecture, each building covered in reddish brick. He feels a coziness to the village, almost as if he's stepped into another world, a place that only exists in someone's dreams, free from planewalkers and free from people that want to do harm. It's a peacefulness that almost feels like a betrayal to his senses. "This looks too perfect," Eric ponders. Laughter erupts from Eric's right. It's children playing, playfully screaming and calling out as they run through another cobblestone street. They vanish into a building. Two women sit to his left, shucking corn, smiling and snickering at Rod and him. Eric grins widely with a playful wave. The older woman blushes while giggling. Ahead of Rod, Eric spots two other men watching them. At least he thinks they're men. Each one has a rifle resting over their forearm. They're draped in dark tunics with a hood and neck scarf masking all but their eyes. Eric gives a hesitating wave, but they do not reciprocate the gesture. Instead, they glare at him with suspicious eyes. Nervous, he looks back to Rod. He is leading them toward a larger building, similar in design, red brick. However, there's a clock tower perched high above. They start to ascend the stairs when the double doors burst open. A large boom echoes through the square. Eric slides closer to Rod. A tall, burly fellow emerges from the building, broad-shouldered, with a neck as thick as an oak tree. His brown hair is combed back and put neatly into a ponytail. His long, thick, dark beard is braided down either side. With his arms stretched out, he yells out to the two men, "Roderick, you have returned!" He lets out a bellowing laugh as he rushes to the men's direction. For a man of his size, he moves with a gentle swiftness. The burly fellow comes in for a bear hug, but stops and takes a wide step back. "Dear God, man, you smell of death and shit, and you look like you were mauled by a possessed bear." It hasn't even been 24 hours since their ordeal with the sirens, and already Rod's wounds have almost completely healed. Another question Eric wanted to voice to the hunter, but thought better of it. Sometimes ignorance is the best course. Rod laughs. I have been stuck in the sanitarium for months. The bearded man raises an eyebrow at his friend and lets out another roar of a laugh. Ha 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 ha! Rightly so, Roderick. He puts his massive right hand on Rod's shoulder and whispers to him, his demeanor turning serious. So, it's done. He already knew the answer to his question, seeing how Rod is traveling with someone who clearly isn't his brother. Tulum. His dark eyes stare into Rod's, awaiting the ill-fated answer. Rod nods. It's now a blood contract. The burly giant gives a slight squeeze on Rod's shoulder, then nods as well. We can discuss the particulars this evening. His eyes leer their way to Rod's companion. Who's the blonde bombshell? He looks over Eric as the thief watches men herding livestock. He was my cellmate at the sanitarium. We escaped together. I knew you were short merchants and figured he'd make a fine recruit. He looks over Eric again, like a farmer sizing up a bull from the herd. Aye, the ladies will find him most desirable. Hopefully he comes from good stock. The merchant leader looks back to Rod, taking another big whiff. He scrunches up his nose as the smell from the men sharply attacks his senses. His right eye starts to twinge from the odor. You really do stink. Rod glares at his friend with annoyance, while another laugh bursts out of the bearded man. He stops laughing abruptly, then snaps his fingers as he bellows, Tippin! A small, slender gentleman appears from behind the olive-skinned man. He's clad in a dark hemp suit, with spectacles sitting ever so gently on the edge of his nose. Yes, sire, Tippin replies, looking down at his clipboard, ready to jot down orders. Give Roderick and his companion a bath ticket. He pauses, taking another big whiff. Better make it 3 tickets. Funny, Rod says snidely. Tippin jots down the orders with elegant strokes of the pen. He never takes his eyes away from the clipboard while replying to his master. Anything else, sire? That's it for now. The merchant leader waves his hand into the air, signaling to Tippin to work on the requests given to him. The thin butler walks behind his master and disappears into the town hall. Rod taps Eric's shoulder, who is still in awe of the bustling village. He turns back to the hunter with a euphoric smile. Eric, this here is Talun Balazar, the leader of the Merchants' Guild, Rod says. Talun extends his monstrous paw. Eric enthusiastically reaches for it. The guildmaster's hand envelops Eric's. You can tell a lot by the grip of a man, and Eric knew Talun was a man he did not want to cross. It's an honor meeting you, Your Majesty, Eric replies, shaking Talun's hand feverishly. Oh, my boy, Talun hollers as his plump belly bounces up and down. I am no king. The merchant leader places his enormous hands on his brass belt buckle. A worn leather belt wraps around his waist, keeping his brown and red tunic from revealing too much. I am but a mere merchant, guiding my fellow pilgrims to a fruitful life, he boasts while putting an arm around Eric. So, Rod tells me you may want to join our guild. Eric cuts his eyes over to Rod. A part of Eric wants to go home. But is it purely because that's all he's ever known? He has an opportunity at a different life. If he were to judge a book by its cover, it's definitely a better life. Talun can see the inner turmoil in Eric's eyes. If you prefer to go home, I have a ship that is departing for Nymph in 2 days. You can probably catch a ride back to Orgrimdir from there. This all seems too perfect. But what do I really have waiting for me? Eric thinks. There must be a catch or some dark secret. No, I trust Rod. He won't steer me wrong. He looks back to his friend. Eric sees no malice in Rod's eyes. At any moment, Rod could have left Eric for dead. He's been dead weight for almost the whole trip. Eric feels this aura of genuine kindness around Rod, around Talun, and this place. No, there's no ulterior motive here. He generally wants to help, Eric persuades himself. He has trusted Rod this far, and for the time being, that's comfort enough. Eric replies to Talun as graciously as he can. Yes, sir, I want to stay. I will do my best to be of service to you and your guild.
Ha-ha! Talun roars. That's excellent news. Now, I shall tell you of our history and our people.
Talun spins them around to the front of the town hall and points left, at the base of the mountain. From this distance, it looks to be a small, round, metallic object nuzzled into the mountain. Talun begins to speak as if giving a sermon.
In the distance is a massive ark, constructed by the ancients. This ark was passed down to our ancestors.
Talun deepens his voice for a dramatic effect as he continues the story. Eric hangs on to every word that pours out of the husky merchant's lips. Rod, however, rolls his eyes. Talun continues, now dramatizing with his hands.
During the War of the Gods, the ancients blessed many of our ancestors with these arks. In it were many amenities that humanity would need to carry on civilization. Food, clothes, tools, and—
I've heard this story 1,000 times, Rod interrupts. I'm going. Where is she?
She's in the storage shed out back where you left her.
Talun gruffly responds to the interruption. Rod slaps Eric on the back, wishing him luck, and heads around the town hall. Talun's boisterous voice can still be heard as Rod walks along the side of the faded red brick building. He makes his way to a wooden shack, resting between two willow trees. He pulls the rusty chains from the door handles and lays them on the ground before sliding both doors back. Racks full of various tools and equipment line the perimeter of the shed. In the back is an old iron workbench. Beams of light slide through the various cracks in the wall and ceiling. Rod looks to the tattered tan blanket in the middle of the room, his coveted prize sleeping underneath its warm, threadbare shield. Rod walks over and grabs the blanket and pulls it back, revealing his baby. Underneath lays his old motorcycle, which he built piece by piece. With each contract, he was able to acquire more parts. He even made deals with several of the merchants for specialized pieces. It was truly a labor of love. The light from the splintered shed walls reflects off the glistening metal dual exhaust. I missed you, Rod says slowly, walking to the seat. He kicks his right leg into the air to straddle his black, matte-finished beauty. Etched very small and very lightly on the side of the gas tank in cursive is a name. Stacy. Sinking into the seat, Rod takes a moment to feel Stacy between his thighs once more. Muscle memory takes hold as he shifts the transmission to neutral and grips the choke. As he turns the key, Stacy purrs to life. He gives it a couple revs to clean the cobwebs out of the old girl. The hunter notices movement by the door through his peripheral vision. He puts Stacy back to sleep and turns the ignition off. Without looking up, he speaks out to the figure. Yes, Tippin? The butler walks through the doorway, eyes locked on his clipboard. His coat, though faded and ragged, is creased and fastened. His slacks, matching the coat, are unkempt at the bottom. Peering through his spectacles, he replies to the hunter, "A shower stall is free for you, sir." Rod waves to the steward and gets off the motorcycle, covering it back up. The thin-haired butler backs away from the opening, allowing Rod to pass. "Please leave your clothes outside the stall so I may clean them," Tippin adds with a sarcastic cough. "Thoroughly." "Okay, Tippin," Rod replies as he heads to the shower stalls. Mercantile finishes the afternoon as it does most days. Children finish school and hurry out to the field to play before sundown. The women are split between tending the fields, washing clothes, preparing meals, or training with merchant recruits. The men lean toward tending to the farmland and livestock, additionally doing any maintenance and repairs to the ships before setting sail for the coastal town Nymph. Mercantile is a snapshot of a time long forgotten, and the people prefer it that way. The citizens go to great lengths to protect their way of life, letting only a select few from the outside world into their fold. After his history lesson on Mercantile, Talun tends to his duties and leaves Eric to wander the village. It's as though his dreams have stepped out of the canvas of his mind, manifesting before him. Never has air smelled so pure, and never has he seen so many colors popping out in vibrant spectacles. To say Eric's senses are in overload would be an understatement. He turns toward the south, and his eyes follow the cobblestone road he saw when they first arrived. He spots children racing up the road to a large windmill sitting in the middle of a field. Their cries of laughter swim on the back of a warm breeze. Curious, he decides to follow them. The young thief walks along the road with the children playfully running to his left. Suddenly, an object hits Eric in the back of the head, then bounces into tall grass. He hears sly snickers off to his right. He turns to see many eyes peering through the tall brush. He waves his hands wildly as he rushes toward the eyes playfully. The children burst out from the brush in all directions, screaming and laughing. Eric chases the children around the windmill for hours. They play various games, such as tag and hide-and-go-seek. It's a moment of complete purity that he never experienced as a child. The innocent laughter he experiences with these children touches him in a way he never thought was possible. He feels at home here, at peace with himself. The dinner bell begins to ring, and the children all rush back toward the town. Each one looks back at Eric with a wave. It's at that moment that he does something he never did before. He thanks God for his life. He crawled through almost 28 years of shit and death to get to this place, witnessing things no human should ever have to witness. But at this very moment, he was glad he did. If Eric was told he'd have to do it all over again to get to this very spot, to see those children play, to see this beautiful snapshot of paradise, you're damn right he would do it all over again. He takes a deep breath and inhales the pure air again as he scans the area. Just a tad bit further, he spots a wooded area with a man sitting on the outskirts and a small trail of smoke leaving his lips. Eric smiles and heads over. Rod is sitting next to his favorite apple tree, enjoying one of its delectable treats. The fruit trees sit right on a hill overlooking the water. He sees Eric coming up on his left. He grabs an apple from his basket and tosses it to Eric, who takes a bite. "Oh, Lord, this is amazing." "Best tasting apples you'll ever come across. Not sure what Talun does to the soil, and I'm pretty sure he wouldn't tell me even if I asked," Rod replies, taking a bite. The apple snaps as Eric takes another bite. He keeps his eyes closed as he chews, enjoying its sweet flavor. As he swallows, Eric looks out to the ocean, its waves crashing against the shore about a half-mile from them. If ever there was a perfect moment to remember, this was it. "So, you decide on what you're going to do now?" Rod asks, taking a drag from his cigarette. I gotta tell you, it's a hard choice. Go back to the dark city, scrounging for food and work, clawing just to survive another dismal day to repeat the whole thing over again, never knowing when death will snatch you in the night, or this place. Eric shakes his head. Damn, this is a tough choice. It's not all roses. If you stay, Talun will expect you to do your share. I understand, and I wouldn't do anything to disappoint or tarnish your name, Eric injects. Speaking of which, the children had a nickname for you. They called you the No-Leaf Clover? This some kind of hunter thing? Yeah, Rod replies, with a tone that indicates that Eric should tread lightly on this topic. Eric swallows before continuing. So, what's the nickname for? Each hunter receives a name upon graduation. It was a rite of passage. Most thought it merely ceremonial, but some took the names to heart. Rod says, getting to his feet. He tosses the apple core. Some used the name as a way to hide their true identity, to protect their families, rarely revealing their true name. Not many of us had families, though, and I think our leader just liked giving us nicknames. He always had some meaning behind the nicknames. At least that's how he conveyed it to us. He always had a flair for the theatrics. Kinda weird, Eric says. What? Rod questions. If this is some kind of hunter hoodoo mystic thing, why did you give me your name so freely? I mean, what if I use your name to track down your family? Rod is silent for a moment. He takes one last drag of his cigarette, then crushes it on the heel of his boot. He looks back at Eric. The Hunters Guild is all but wiped out. No one really left. And I have no family. Kinda seems pointless to keep up with old customs for the sake of it. His statement was a partial truth. He no longer has any family by blood, and knows a few hunters he considers family to still be alive. They're too damn stubborn to be dead, he thinks. So, what does it mean? Eric asks. What? Your nickname, what does it mean? Rod is somewhat hesitant to answer. He barely knows Eric, yet feels a kindred connection with him. Fate is tirelessly working to push humanity forward. There's a reason Eric was put into that cell with him. Its true purpose may not be evident now, but someday it will be. He looks out to the horizon, then back to Eric. It means I'm one unlucky son of a bitch. The hunter grabs his basket of apples and begins to walk back to the village. Eric turns with a confused expression. Wait, is that it? That's all you're going to say? It's late, and I'm hungry. The building to the left of the town hall is the cafeteria. Better hurry, the best desserts go pretty fast. Eric follows his friend down the hill, still questioning him on the last statement. Rod smiles while eating another apple. He enjoys the camaraderie more than he lets on. It's been over 2 years since he's seen his family. That absence digs deep into his soul. But his guilt is still too new to face them. For them as well, he has no doubt. The men continue past the windmill as the sun says another farewell to the peaceful town of Mercantile.